Hi everyone! Today we're going to be crocheting this slouchy beanie with a small little bill here to protect you a little bit from the sun. If you're interested in other beanie tutorials, check the links in the description. And for our beanie, I am working with the Cascade Yarns wool yarn, and this is a size 4 medium weight yarn, and it's roughly 220 yards, and you will need about that much yarn to complete this beanie. And I'm using a size G or 6 or 4 1/4 millimeter crochet hook. And you're also going to need a safety pin, a scrap piece of yarn, or a stitch marker for this. And we're going to begin with a magic circle, so take your tail and drape it over your working yarn and pinch that intersection while you insert your crochet hook. From here we're going to yarn over and pull through our loop, and then we're going to separate our loop out so that the loop and the tail are on the top part of our magic circle. From here, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to place 1 single crochet in our magic circle, and then 15 double crochets inside of our magic circle. And when you're placing these stitches, make sure you're placing them in the loop as well as over your tail here. And once you have your 15 double crochets in place, I want you to pull on your tail to tighten the gap in your magic circle. And you do have the option of crocheting over your tail in the next row if you want, by just lining your tail up with your stitches. So we're going to dive right into this first single crochet from our last row, and we're just going to place 1 double crochet here. And this is actually going to count as the last stitch of your first row. And from here, we're going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row, starting in this next stitch. And we want to make sure that we mark the first of these single crochets, and I usually do that by placing my first 2 stitches. And then I go back and mark the first of my 2. So at the end of your row, you should have a total of 16 single crochets. And when you make it back to your stitch marker, you can go ahead and remove it. And the pattern for our next row is to place 2 double crochets in each stitch in our row, going all the way around. So make sure you mark the first of your double crochet stitches, and when you get to the end of your row, you should have a total of 32 double crochets. And when you make it back around to your stitch marker, you can remove it. And for our next row, we're going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row for a total of 32 stitches. And don't forget to mark the first stitch of your row. And again, you can remove your stitch marker when you make it to the end of your row. And the pattern for our next row is to place 1 double crochet in our first stitch, and then 2 double crochets in our second stitch. And we're just going to alternate between 1 and 2 double crochets going all the way around our row for a total of 48 double crochets. And don't forget to mark that first stitch of your row. And if you notice that your little first circle is popping up, you can just sort of start to flatten it out between your rows, and that will help shape it. When you get to the end of your row, you can remove your stitch marker. And for our next row, we're just going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row. And don't forget to mark that first stitch. So when you get to the end of your row, you should have a total of 48 single crochets. And at the end of your row, you can remove your stitch marker. And the pattern for our next row is to place 1 double crochet in our first 2 stitches, and then 2 double crochets in our third. And we're just going to repeat that going around our row for a total of 64 double crochets. And don't forget to mark that first stitch. And at the end of your row, you can remove your stitch marker. And for our next row, we're going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row for a total of 64 stitches. And at the end of your row, you can remove your stitch marker. And for our next row, we're going to place 1 double crochet in our first 3 stitches and then 2 double crochets in our 4th. And we're going to repeat that going around our row for a total of 80 double crochets. And don't forget to mark your first stitch. And at the end of your row, you can remove your stitch marker. And the pattern for our next row is to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row for a total of 80 single crochets. And at the end of your row, you can remove your stitch marker. And the pattern for our next row is to place 1 double crochet in each stitch in our row for a total of 80 double crochets. And again, when you get to the end of your row, you can remove your stitch marker. And from here, we are going to repeat our last 2 rows 7 times so that we have a total of 8 of these sections where we place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row, and then a row where we place 1 double crochet in each stitch in our row. And once you repeat those 2 rows 7 times, your beanie should look something like this. And this will create a slouchy beanie. So if you don't want your beanie to slouch, go ahead and remove these last 2 sections. And you want to make sure that you leave off on a double crochet row. So make sure that you've ended your last row on a double crochet stitch row, and what we're going to do is alternate between front and back post stitches. And we're going to start with a front post stitch. So to do that, yarn over, and then we're going to insert our crochet hook between our single crochet and this first double crochet. And we want to work right here between the stitches. So then we're going to loop our crochet hook around behind the stem or post that forms our stitch and insert it between our first and second double crochet. So it should look something like this. From here, we're going to yarn over and pull up through the post, and then we're going to yarn over and drop 2 loops at a time to complete our stitch. So the process for placing a back post stitch is basically the same, except you want to insert your crochet hook from behind your project rather than in front like you did the front post. So yarn over and then insert your crochet hook between your first and second double crochet from behind. Then cross over your post and reinsert your crochet hook between your second and third double crochet like this. Again, just capturing the post that forms your stitch. And it is helpful if you turn your work like this so you can see what you're doing. From here, we're going to yarn over and pull up through our post, and then yarn over and drop 2 loops at a time to complete our stitch. So for the rest of the row, we're just going to alternate between placing front and back post stitches going all the way around. And you should end on a back post stitch and have a total of 80 post stitches. And when you make it around to the end of your row, you should have created these nice little ridges. So from here, we just want to follow like stitches. So we're going to place front post stitches in our previous row's front posts and back post stitches in our back posts. So to work around a post stitch, you're just going to treat it like it is a double crochet. So just work around the stem that forms your stitch, just like we were doing in the previous row. And we are going to repeat this for our next 2 rows. And once you've added your 2 rows of post stitches, your brim should look something like this. And if you're not interested in adding the little bill, you can literally just cut and tie off your yarn by placing a slip stitch in your following stitch like this, and then you're just going to cut and tie it off from here. And if you want to make the bill, then go ahead and place 1 single crochet in our next 22 stitches. And once you have your 22 single crochets in place, then we're going to place 1 single crochet in the front loop only, so the loop closest to you when you're looking at your V portion of your stitch, in that next stitch. Then 1 half double crochet in the front loop only of the next stitch. So yarn over and slide your crochet hook in that front loop, then yarn over and pull up through the front loop, and yarn over and drop all 3 loops. We're going to place 1 double crochet in the front loop only of our next stitch. And from here, grab your handy stitch marker, and we are going to count out 31 stitches. And you're going to mark your 31st stitch with that stitch marker. So from here, we're going to place 1 triple crochet in the front loop only of our next stitch. So yarn over twice and then insert your crochet hook in that front loop, yarning over and pulling up through the loop, and then yarn over and drop 2 loops at a time until you complete your stitch. And we're going to repeat that in the front loop only of our next stitch. And then in this 3rd front loop, we want to place 2 triple crochets. So we're going to repeat this pattern, placing 1 triple crochet in the front loop only of our next 2 stitches, and then placing 2 triple crochets in the front loop only of our 3rd stitch until we make it to our stitch marker. So for this portion, you should have 40 triple crochets. So now your bill should look something like this, sort of coming up out of your beanie. And you can remove your stitch marker. And working in the front loop only of our next stitch, we're going to place 1 double crochet. Then in the next stitch, we're going to place 1 half double crochet in that front loop. Then in our next stitch, we're going to place 1 single crochet in that front loop. Then working under the full stitch of our next stitch, we're going to place a slip stitch. And I want you to turn your work after your slip stitch, so do not place a chain 1. And we are going to sort of awkwardly dive right back into our slip stitch and place another slip stitch. So now we're working under the full stitch for this row, and we're going to place 1 single crochet in our next stitch, 1 half double crochet in the stitch after that, and then 1 double crochet in our next stitch. And if you have some issues distinguishing your stitches, go back to where we started right here, and we're going to count up, and we're going to mark our double crochet. From here, we're going to be working up to our stitch marker just like we did before. And the pattern for this row is going to be to place 1 triple crochet under the full stitch of our first 3 stitches. And then we're going to place 2 triple crochets in our 4th stitch. And we're just going to repeat that until we make it to our stitch marker for a total of 50 triple crochets. And when you make it to the end of your row, then your bill should look something like this. So from here, we're going to remove our stitch marker, and we're going to place 1 double crochet up under the full stitch of our next stitch, 1 half double crochet in the stitch after that, and then 1 single crochet in our following stitch. Then we want to place 1 slip stitch in our next stitch and turn our work. From here, we're going to fold our bill back like this, and we're going to be working in these back loops only that we had left over from the base of our beanie here. And diving into this first back loop right here, we're going to place 1 single crochet. And take note that I did not place a chain 1 after placing my slip stitch. So we want this to be as seamless as possible like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and just mark that stitch. I'm marking the slip stitch, not the single crochet that I just placed. This just makes it a little bit easier on your way back down. From here, I'm going to place 1 half double crochet in my next back loop, and then 1 double crochet in the back loop after that. From here, we're going to follow our original pattern with our triple crochets. So we're going to place 1 triple crochet in our first 2 back loops, and then 2 triple crochets in our third back loop. And we want to repeat that until we get close to the end of our row. So we want to stop 3 back loops back from our beginning to account for our single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. So you can mark the back loop in front of your double crochet if you think you need to. And when you make it back down, then your bill should look something like this. And we're going to work 1 double crochet in this next back loop. Then 1 half double crochet in the back loop after that. Then 1 single crochet in our next back loop. And working on the base of your beanie, if you kind of pull this first layer of your bill up, you can see this stitch where you've already worked. We're just going to slide our crochet hook in that stitch and place our slip stitch and then turn our work. From here, just like before, we want to dive right back into our slip stitch with a slip stitch. And we're not placing a chain between these stitches, so it's a little bit awkward. We're going to place 1 single crochet under the full stitch of our next stitch, then 1 half double crochet in the stitch after that, and then 1 double crochet in the following stitch. And from here, we're going to follow our second increasing row here. So we're going to place 1 triple crochet in our next 3 stitches, and then place 2 triple crochets in our 4th stitch. And we want to repeat this until we get down to the last 3 stitches of this portion of our bill. And at the end of your row, you're going to place 1 double crochet, then 1 half double crochet, and then 1 single crochet in that last stitch before the stitch that you marked. Then we're going to remove our stitch marker. And just like we did before, we want to pull our bill out, and on this main portion of our beanie here, we're going to place a slip stitch. And we're going to make sure we place it in the stitch that we've already worked all of our other slip stitches. And then we're going to turn our work around again. So from here, we're going to be joining the 2 edges of our bill with slip stitches. So to do that, just insert your crochet hook in the next stitch on both sides of your bill like this. Then yarn over and pull through for a slip stitch. And we're just going to repeat this process in each of these corresponding stitches going up the edge of our bill here. And once you're done joining those 2 sections of your bill, it should look something like this. From here, we want to dive right back into the same stitch where we've already worked on the main portion of our beanie and place a slip stitch. And from here, we're just going to place 1 single crochet in our next 22 stitches to make it back to the back of our beanie. And once you've made it all the way around back to the back of your beanie, then we're just going to place a slip stitch in our next stitch and then cut and tie off our yarn. And I'm going to hide my tail by weaving it in the direction that I was crocheting. And since this is a beanie, you really want to give your tail a nice big tug to make sure it won't pop out when somebody with a large head wears it. So now your beanie should look something like this, with this nice little bill to help protect you a little bit from the sun. Thank you so much for working with me, and I hope you have a wonderful, awesome day.